Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Lineage Break, a Grand Archive TCG podcast. I am your host, Cam. With me, as always, is the glue, Steve.
Hi, Cam.
Hi, Steve.
How's it going, Cam?
I'm doing all right. A little tired today.
When aren't you tired?
I don't know.
On a Friday morning.
I need to be pumped, full of my Red Bull. You know.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
I took a little too much melatonin last night. 4 in the morning.
Yeah,
Yep. Still a little sleepy.
I was part of that work team for like 2 hours, and then I was like, I can't. Yeah. Can't go anymore.
The new season of League of Legends has released, and it is not good for my health. Hey, how you doing, guys? Welcome back. Welcome to Lineage Break, our Grand Archive podcast, where we sometimes talk about Grand Archive.
Yeah, most of the time it's just us talking. We appreciate you coming.
We have ALC sort of in like, I don't want to say its entirety or even close to its entirety. I think we're still missing, I don't know, like 50, 60 cards, something like that.
Which is kind of wild because like we've been doing a little bit of testing and it feels complete.
Yeah. So our testing has been going well. Steve and I aren't. It's kind of nice, unlike some people who I can see out in the store. We don't have to test for Ontario because we're not going because we're poor. So we're pretty relaxed on the trying out ALC stuff. So I don't think that we're playing the most, tuned decks, nor are we really trying to because we don't have any rush.
Right.
We have a good couple of months, but
we're messing around with the new cards, trying to find the sweet spot, and both of our decks seem pretty fun.
I'm tentatively excited. I think both of our decks seem pretty good, but it's into each other, right? So it's unclear if we've both built bad decks and the bad decks feel fine into each other, or if we're on to something. But it is cool. I think that the ALC champions feel very their identities feel very unique, which is cool. That is something that I think I've talked about on the show about the previous DOA champions having a bit of a like skewed identity because all of the decks feel like sort of similar, at least aside from Mage. But I think that's largely due to the fact that DOA was like our launch set, right? So it's like supposed to be a little bit more evergreen,
right? And having 390 cards is really not a good test to say, hey, these champions, like once we get another few sets in and we see more mage cards, or not mage is its own thing, but like we see more assassin themed stuff, right? Or like
Tristan level 3,
never again another warrior card ever being printed, because that's fine.
They're going to be saying that about Guardian in 3 months. I guarantee it.
Based on testing, probably.
I think Guardian's pretty good, man. You get most of the good stuff the Warrior does.
Sometimes, when you hit level 2 and then you're just like, hey, idiot, take 13.
I think you're just a big old Timmy and you like big dinosaurs.
Hey, sometimes, I guess. I don't know. Which is weird because I've never been the Timmy player.
I see your deck and I'm like, wow, look how efficient this Allies deck is. And every time you talk about it, you're like, I can hit you for 13 with this heavy swing.
It's so good, though, because it's just like, oh, well, I have the extra 2 cards. I'm just going to bonk you on the head.
Right.
It's kind of fun.
Maybe it's your old age. It's turning you into a Timmy.
Yeah, maybe. Because before I used to be like
stompy dinosaurs.
I was like a combo player, and like a control player. And now I'm just like, well, I'm just going to punch you with Tony really hard.
I like big number. So yeah, we're having fun. We're having lots of fun. Yeah. I wake up in cold sweats thinking about playing Arisana. So
I think this is the first time in a long time where I've showed up on the store not on a podcast.
I know.
Champion Day to come and play.
It's because you're an ambassador now. You have a reputation to uphold.
It is the ambassador, but I'm also just really having fun with the set.
Yeah. No, it's good.
It's
very
like,
good.
Oh, man.
I think it's like all things, right? That, obviously weebs are new developers, so they're going to find their stride, right? Like, obviously the first thing that you make is not going to be the best. If we point to fellow indie darling Flesh and Blood, right? The first Flesh and Blood set that was designed was Monarch, which was the third set. And hey, Monarch is a fucking nightmare set. It's terrible. So, like, thank God for them they didn't release it first. But it is the first one that they designed, and it shows. So, I think GA has done a much better job than that. I think DOA is a very good set. It's got a couple of key problems that at this point have been solved. But I think ALC feels so far just like so much like far and beyond better than ALC than DOA did, and even than FTC did. So we're super excited. We've been doing some testing. You guys will hear more about me and Steve testing because, again, we're not keeping any secrets until we start. I don't know. I guess we got to start practicing for Nationals. Is like actually really close. It's like 6 weeks, 7 weeks or something.
Something like that.
My Lord, I got to go back down to
Houston.
Glorious Houston. Ugh. When here, I'll rent the venue myself. I don't care, dude. Just don't make me travel.
Right. Surely us renting the venue cheaper than flights.
That might be true. Yeah, we like rent next door, and then we're like, we can hold our 150 person event or whatever.
Because both stores.
Yeah. I don't know. We're super excited to be going to Glorious Houston. It's our favorite place in the world, and we will see you there if you're going to Nationals. Hit us up. Let us know. We'll be hanging out. I don't think we're gonna be there like super long.
No, I think fly
in Friday.
Yeah, fly in Friday.
Monday.
Yeah.
No extra days for Nationals because
we gotta
save all of our extra days for Ascent Worlds, where we will meet all you lovely people. But so today, our topic for the show today. Now we're in the new year, but we are most importantly very close to the launch of ALC, which is, as of today, 2 weeks. Recording 2 weeks from today. So it is time. It is that time of the season that you maybe love, hopefully, where we do our retrospective. So we are doing our Fractured Crown retrospective today, taking a look back at Fractured Crown, what happened during the Fractured Crown timeline, the meta, all that stuff, which is a lot to cover.
Yeah, we were talking about it before the show, and I was like, yeah, not much happened. And then I remembered that there was like 4 months after Houston.
Right.
That was just like, oh yeah, there was a whole like store championship.
Right.
And regional.
And regionals that we ran.
Yeah. It's a whole bunch of stuff that happened.
Yeah, so let's start at the beginning. So FTC to me sort of feels like I guess current FTC feels much different than it did when it came out, right? When Fractured Crown came out, it was right before Ascent Houston, which was the big marquee event for Grand Archive, our first giant organized play event, which was wildly successful. But Fractured Crown was out like 3-4 weeks before that.
I don't even think it was that long. It was probably I thought it was like 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, it was pretty soon.
It was like not a lot of testing time.
I don't think it was as close as ALC is to Ontario, obviously, but it was pretty like close. But I think a large issue for a lot of people that played in that tournament, ourselves included, and we've talked about this, so we won't dwell on it super long. I think the later stuff is more interesting, but that meta was super dominated by Spirit Blade Ascension and Sword of Avarice. Big shout outs as always to the TCG team that found the right deck for the tournament and countered all of these cursed Merlin Spirit Blade Ascension decks. But that meta was miserable.
Yeah, there was a good time where Cam and I would just look at each other and go, I don't know how much longer I can take this. And thankfully, Weebs also agreed with us and dealt with the problem.
I think, on our show, we like to be honest, and we know that our beautiful friends of the development team do watch the show, so I try to, not be too harsh. But I do think it's important to, say how we feel, especially when we're looking back on, on the set. I think we might have waited a little bit too long on the Spirit Blade ban. I understand where they came from, where the game is new, and especially before Ascent, right? Like, you don't want to make these big format shifting bans before your first event, right? Because then nobody has any confidence that the game is ever going to be stable, right? If you have to make these giant bans before your first ever event. But that being said, for people that are in franchise like us, it was a long time under the rule of Limelight's Ferrari, and then subsequently Merlin coming out in FTC and just doing the same thing but better.
Yeah,
these Fire Merlin decks with their fireballs, and the Wind Merlin decks just didn't have a win con except for the Majestic Spirit. Not great, but so that we don't dwell on that too long. After that, I think
a bunch of very cool things happened.
Right.
Because we got the bans.
Right.
But we also got Proxy's Vault. And I think Proxy's Vault is the coolest thing in any card game ever.
Yeah, I think that we said this when we came back from Houston, but that presentation at the end of Ascend Houston was so reinvigorating for both of us, with not only Proxy's Vault, obviously, the organized play stuff, which a lot of it we still haven't done, which is, coming up early this year. But, Proxy's Vault was huge. The ban list was huge. And they were the same time, right?
Yeah, they dropped the ban list with the
with Scepter.
The first, what was it? Scepter and Stone?
Yeah, and Stone Scale Band.
Yeah.
We had the big ban of Ascension, the ban of Reckless Conversion, and then the release of Scepter of Lumina and Stone Scale Band. And so something that I was going to say earlier is I think, to me, after those bans, this is the first time that I felt like I was playing the game that I wanted Grand Archive to be.
Yeah.
Because we had such a great time when we started the game, right? Like,
right.
Before anyone was playing it, before we even had locals, before the game was even released, right? But also before, we're not deck building savants, we didn't know about all of the broken stuff that you could do in DOA, right? So when we first started, we were playing a very, card advantage oriented, board based, mid-range game, right?
Yeah.
And I think after the bans of Ascension and Conversion, that's what we got. Maybe a little bit to its detriment, but that is what we got. Every deck that was performing was some sort of, flavor of a mid-range deck, or some of them skew a little bit more towards the control deck. We have the one dedicated aggro deck in Fire Xander. We have the one dedicated combo deck in Fire Rye. There was some Wind Rye floating around for a while too. But yeah, I don't know. How did you feel about our meta that we were leaving now?
I felt that it was definitely refreshing to get into a meta where it was just not, hey, I'm gonna sit down. Are you playing Merlin? Okay, I'm gonna have a bad time. It was oh, what are you playing? What flavor of deck are you playing?
Right.
Where before it was very much just not the case. Where it was just well, I guess I'm playing against the mirror because I have to play Merlin or else I'm losing.
Right.
But I really enjoyed the fact that decks like Wind Rye were showing up. Yeah. You had these open, no, I wouldn't say open meta, but you had this meta where you could expand into playing other decks and experience the other cards that exist in the game without just feeling bad about it.
Right.
And I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, it felt like the first time you could make deck building choice, right? Because if you're including a a suboptimal card in the Spearblade Ascension world, you're just you're throwing, right?
Right, and think of the Wind Ride deck. They were playing Arcane Elemental,
right?
That card was unplayable, and now it's I wouldn't say it's the best deck in the world, but it's still it'll get you,
right?
It's kind of sick.
Yeah, I remember when we were testing for Houston, both you and I were doing some amount of testing on these more tempo-oriented assassin decks, Tristan and these sort of tempo strategies that would then just get blown out of the water by Ascension, right? So we didn't pay them any mind, but that sort of strategy then became super prevalent in Water Lorraine after we got the bannings, and even Tristan. You and I have both been playing a lot of Tristan as of late.
Yeah, I love Tristan,
and she feels totally fine.
Yeah, you don't have that it's the turn, right? The turn where you're just I'm about to pop off with Tristan,
right?
And then it's also the turn where they're just
I'm gonna loop
or whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna loop 15 my Spirit Blade 15 times,
right,
and draw 1 million cards, and then put you so far out of the game where it's just not possible to win.
Yeah.
You know, and now it's like, yeah, you still have to deal with Horse, which is really hard, but like you can just get there beforehand.
Yeah, you have an out, right? Like the game doesn't end on turn 4,
right?
And I think that's the only thing that I think was a little tough about FTC, and I'm curious if we'll see a fix to it in ALC, but I'm not entirely sure. Is that the format post bans was pretty slow, right? I think the format with Spirit Blade Ascension was too fast in a way, right? Like all of these people playing Ascension mirrors were going to time. There at Houston, I saw so many games that either ended in time or ended 1-0, but I think a lot of that was due to people not understanding when they're dead. I think that is a huge part about those card advantage Ascension piles, that like even in the mirror, I would say most of the time the person that hits it first is the one that is going to take that game. Obviously, it's not 100% of the time, but the first person that gets to like have control over the board with their 15 card hand is usually the one that comes out on top, right? But you have to grind through that 50-minute game. The nice thing about FTC as a format is, or post ban list FTC, is that all the games just naturally went pretty long. I think that the game feels much more skill intensive and much more card economy dedicated, which I think is the coolest part about Grand Archive, is the fact that your resources and your like threats are the same thing, right? Like the ability to play more cards and having more cards of the same resource, so card advantage is so important. That's why we don't really have any true card advantage in the game, right? Just something that people don't really consider. That think about cards other than exactly Spirit Blade Ascension that are like a true +1 in card advantage, and there are so few of them in the game. There's a lot of cards that like cantrip and give you some like very minor benefit, right? Like we look at stuff like Gentle Respite, right? It's like the closest we get to a +1, which is like a conditional draw card and Floating Memory, and Floating Memory is like worth somewhere in the like half a card range, right? But we don't have Divination. We had Spirit Blade Ascension, which is as close as we get, and it was broken, had to be banned, right? Because card advantage is so important.
Right.
So every game in FTC went really long because it's all about these, like grinding your opponent down when you're playing these mid-range decks like Water the Rain or Allies or even, Merlin, Fire Merlin, whatever. Wind, Dry, also very mid-rangey deck. So I love that, personally. I think the only complaint that I had is that still it feels like there's not enough time to complete 3 games in most matches. We saw that a lot at our regionals, where there was, there was a reasonable amount of ties at the regionals that we ran, and then when we ran a Top Cut, we did it untimed, as you should, but those games went really long. Maybe that's the alleviation of pressure, right? That the clock is gone, so people don't have to rush anymore.
The breath of fresh air, right?
Like, some of those rounds go like an hour and a half, which is crazy long. So I'm not sure. I think that ALC, we won't dwell too much on ALC predictions, as this is our FTC retrospective, but it's unclear to me if ALC is going to fix that, because a lot of these decks are late game oriented, but I do think they all seem like more powerful than their predecessors. So maybe it's the same thing where, we spend less time at level 3 once we get there, or at least the writing's on the wall, right?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, not to toot your horn, but once you hit level 3, the game's pretty much over.
Right. Turn 12. Turn 11.
Yeah, turn 11.
That's the one. Sometimes 10.
Sometimes 10, yeah.
Yeah. Would you agree, Stephen?
I would agree. I think everything about the game currently, not ALC including, feels very grindy, and I kind of enjoy grindy games. I'd rather play a game and then just like get stomped on turn 2 and then have to sit around for an hour while everyone else gets to play.
Yeah,
it's kind of how I feel.
And tell that to our Fire Xander players of the world.
Yeah, well, they are doing their thing, and hopefully you have the cards to stop that.
Right. Yeah, I think that nothing in FTC felt unbeatable, which
Correct.
I think is really important. That every deck felt like you could build to beat it. I think the deck that people had the most trouble with was Water Lorraine. I think she's the one that saw the most success.
But I feel like that was like the most mid-range deck that we've ever seen, right? Because
surely.
Not only was it an aggro deck, but it also had the resources and stuff to interrupt your opponent from playing cards, which is very important in an aggro. I mean, like if you're like, hey, here's this super sick 4/5 or whatever,
right?
I'm gonna hit you every turn with it, but I can also protect it.
Yeah, we sit in a really weird spot where there's not a whole lot of direct removal in the game, and we're getting like a little bit more coming up, but even still, it feels like ally removal is at a low. Like we don't have terror, right? Like we don't have 1-for-1 answers, basically at all. There's plenty of conditional ways to kill allies. You know, you think the closest that you get to like a true removal spell is like Fireball, right? But like even that, you have to be, X level or whatever to make Fireball work.
Yeah, I actually don't think there is a card that says destroy target ally.
We have Excalibur, and that's
Excalibur. That's destroy anything, right? And that locks you into either being Xander or Trisket.
Right. Both, right?
Both,
by nature, yeah. So it did make, I think, the tempo strategy pretty good, because they were good at protecting their threats, because they were the Water Lorraine deck has access to cards like Frostbind and Fracturize. But there's also not a whole lot of Doomblades running around. I'm really curious if Water Lorraine would have the same success that it did if there was more true removal, more true board wipes. And we are getting some more of that in ALC, so I'm wondering where that deck is going to go. But I had a lot of fun. That is what I played over the FTC season, as I played Water Lorraine, and that was just a match made in heaven. I think I really liked playing that deck, and it's very my style.
Yeah, I was gonna say you were pretty much in your element that entire season.
Yeah, I mean it's what I've wanted to play since DOA, right? Like I got to put my lunettes in my deck, right? Like that is the sort of strategy that I was looking to play. Frostbind or Frostworn Paladin and lunettes. What did you bounced around a little bit? What did you play this season, Steve?
We all know that I played a bunch of meme decks.
Yeah.
That none of those actually matter, but the decks that I play, the deck that I played that did matter was I just, I took a TCG a note out of TCG's book and I just played Wind Allies.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I did well.
Yeah, and that was a lot of your success was in like the latter half of the season, and I think at that point there was a lot of people on the Discord and online sort of not paying Wind Allies its respect, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people had like seen it and then moved off of it because of all the new cards that we've been seeing, and then I was just like, you know what? I have to go back. I'm gonna just go back to a tried and true strategy, and I'm just gonna play this. And it worked out pretty well for me.
Yeah. If Wind Allies always feels to me like that. You're like 55 into the field sort of deck, right? Where it's like it's fine in everything. It's not like an absurd matchup for anyone. I guess it is pretty good into Fire Sander, but just like a good middle of the road.
I think I think the only deck that Wind Allies is probably like 90-10 into is Rye, because I can just like, I'm going to put 12 damage by turn 2 onto the table. You have to just have it or I win.
Yeah.
And that's how I, like, every time I sat down against Rye at our regionals or store championship or something, that's exactly how it played. While I was playing Wind Allies, it was just like, I sat down and hey, I'm just going to drop 3 allies and I'm going to swing at you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what they are.
Right.
Because I'm not worried about you removing them.
Right. Yeah, and those always feel bad. For obviously the Rye player, not so much for you. That is something that I would hopefully like to see us move away from. It's not wholly in the developers' hands, right? It's very hard for them to know how the game is going to shake out, because there are like 6-7 people,
right? And they develop the make the deck a specific way, and they're going to play that way. But there's people out here that think so outside the box on how cards function together that there's always going to be that deck that they didn't think of.
Right. Yeah. It's hard for sure to know, like, yeah, maybe there's a deck that like an archetype that exists that they missed. I think that's a little bit easier for them to suss out when the game is so small, but as time goes on, it'll get even harder. But also, like, I assume he's memeing a lot of times when Silidar says it on Discord, but several times he's led us to believe that there's like decks that they played in testing that people just didn't play.
Yeah.
Which is tough if that's like how you sort of design, in your head, and you assume based on your internal testing that, like, oh, this is the deck that people are going to play, and thus, this is balanced, et cetera, and then people just never find that, right? So I think the thing that did feel a little bit bad about FTC is we were still, even though the format felt so diverse, there was very little champion diversity. It was almost exclusively Lorraine and Merlin. There's like a sprinkle of Xander, a sprinkle of Rye, and no Sylvie anywhere to be seen.
Well,
which is tough, right? Like,
I think the issue with Sylvie, right, is like a lot of her powerful cards, even now, are either locked behind Terra or they're locked behind a ridiculous pride number that's so unattainable to get before any of the other decks that exist are online.
It's a strange design, to say the least. I think that pride is a really cool mechanic flavor wise, and I think about cards like Capricious Links, which I think are balanced pretty well around their drawback. But it's hard. It feels like we've had the transition of creature power in the span of 3 months instead of the span of 10 years like it was in Magic, where like Sylvie's still playing Hill Giants with downside and other people get to play, like real creatures,
right.
Like I think a lot about like, I don't know, Ordinary Bear, right? Which, to be fair, is a pretty good card, right? But it's a 3-mana 2/3 with floating memory, but it's a 3-mana 2/3 with, I believe it is conditional floating memory because it's class bonus, and with a downside, right? Where, if you're playing Warrior or now Guardian, you get to play Windrider Vanguard, which is just a 3-mana 2/3 with hideous upside, right?
Which it just never tapped.
Right, yeah. So it's like, why? I don't know why Sylvie is competing with other creatures. Like, she should have all of her creatures be better than theirs because they have this.
It's
downside,
It's almost like I feel, it's like Sylvie should have had a card that, I mean, she does now, but like it should have been like a more of a blanket effect where it just shuts pride off. Like, I know she has
she's Avatar of Gaia
that
selectively
does
shuts it off.
But like, there should have been a way to blanket effect shut off all my pride because she is the tamer, right? She should have been, or there should have been a tamer that shuts off pride. Like,
I feel like they were trying to toe the line a little bit, and that is, I think, where the problem is. If you want to give this deck an identity, like, we'll continue using Ordinary Bear as an example, right? It's a 2/3 with Pride 2. Mm-hmm. Pride 2 is like very accomplishable, right? It just means that when everyone else gets to play your 2/3 on turn 1, on turn 2, you don't, right? Because that's Pride 2. If you play it on turn 1, turn 2, it's not going to be on until your turn 3. But then, like, once you meet the condition for stuff like, Ordinary Bear, Grey Wolf, whatever, they're not good. Like the reward that you get for meeting their downside is not good.
Yeah.
So I feel like she would probably be in a better place if they were all just like grossly overstated with like kind of an absurdly high pride number, where at least like if your Ordinary Bear is like a 2-mana 3/4 or whatever, but it has pride 4, it's still off for those first like 2 or 3 turns of the game that it was going to be anyways.
Right.
But at least once you meet that requirement, it's a real card.
Right.
Like, I feel like she gets put into this spot where she has to play 1 or 2 turns behind because of the downside on all of her creatures. But then once she gets there, she will get there, but then she's like, it's turn 3. I get to play the stuff that you've been playing for 3 turns, and she's still behind the ball, right?
And, I can't say that, like, sometimes, like, a Sylvie deck won't just, like, surprise you.
Sure.
Like, you get a Bedivere out early, and then,
like,
you
have a couple of good cards.
Right. You can, like, snowball into stuff and snowball into wins and stuff, but, like, I feel like overall, like you're saying, like, you're just always behind, and being behind like a Lorraine player is
it's catastrophic. She gets so much free value.
It's almost unwinnable. Like right, like you like get to the point where you're just like, well, they have like 2 3s in play, and then with the threat of going to level 2 and drawing like 4 cards, like okay.
And you hope against those decks that you get to Terra, and then your cards are better than theirs, but they probably kill you before that. Right. And then any other deck that is like going as slow as you are probably has a better late game than you do, so you get to Terra and they're like playing Merlin, you're dead anyway.
Right. Yeah, they're like, oh hey, you have that like nice bear. Here's my horse. Deal with it.
Right.
Like
so Sylvie's in a rough spot in FTC, and unfortunately in ALC she's not going to get a whole lot since it's not, we're not getting Tamer cards. She might like incidentally get some cards that other people are going to play, but if they're cards that she can play, they're cards that, Lorraine or whatever will get to play as better. Well. But like I said, it's hard to balance everything, right? Like you can't ever expect that a trading card game comes out and, in this like 4-hero sort of thing that DOA was, that all 4 of them are going to be
playable,
equally as good, right? It's just not feasible. But my hope is with ALC and with stuff coming in the future that I think as the game gets wider, characters and classes will find their niche, right? Like I think we will get to a point where Tamer finds a place in the meta that it sits. And maybe it's bad into Warrior, and maybe we just like had an unfavorable place for it to be starting at, right? Like maybe Tamer is the counter to all of the classes in ALC, who knows, right? Not now, but in the future. And we just didn't see that in DOA, right? Because she was like in an environment that wasn't good for her. I hope we see that with Xander as well. I think Xander got sort of bailed out in our FTC season in that I think Fire Xander is a very strong deck, and I think basically the only like dedicated aggro deck. Plays a lot like a burn deck, right? It's killing you on like turn 3. We have 2 very talented Fire Xander players that play here with us, so we see that a lot. But I don't think, personally, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, developers, let me know, send me an emoji if I'm wrong, but I don't think this is sort of like Xander's designed play pattern, right? Like I don't think that the burn deck is in line with Xander's sort of identity. Maybe like a little bit, we get like stuff like Mark the Target, but I don't think the Mark the Target was designed as I play 4 of these as shocks under my Poison Dagger. I think it was designed, with that like preparation counter sort of thing in mind, right? So I think it would be cool for Xander to see some more of his assassin identity, where a lot of, the play that Xander's seeing now is just, he is the best person that holds a burn deck solely on the back of Korhazi Courier. And I think that is the only thing that is, keeping the Fire Xander deck as a Xander deck. Who knows? Like in ALC, it might not even be a Xander deck anymore. Maybe we have cards that are, enough better in one other class to not play Korhazi Courier, because I think that's the only card that's keeping it there.
Poison Dagger, right?
Oh, is that class bonus?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess you do have to be assassin, but we did get towards the end of the season a Proxy's Vault card for Xander that I think ended up being pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, I fell into that trap. I thought it would be better, but it felt like a card where it's just like didn't really have like a great time to ever get it out. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I understood what it was for, but like it never really felt like that impactful compared to like the other Proxy Vault cards that we've seen. Yeah,
like Scepter of Lumina was such a boon for water decks. It like wholeheartedly kept water on the map, right?
Stone Band.
Yeah, even Stone Scale Band was such a boon for Sylvie, giving her some sort of out still in some games.
It made that like weird Exodia deck playable for a little bit. Like,
right. Yeah, I think I don't think Insignia is a bad card.
I think
it was a little underwhelming at release, and I think that the developers know that as well, as we are supposed to be getting Xander level 2 Deft Executor on launch day with ALC, I believe, is when that's launching. Is the banless update on the 26th. But I think maybe Korhazi Insignia was designed for the future and not for current. Yeah. I can see a world where Korhazi's Insignia and Luxem Xander sees a lot more play in a slower meta, right? Yeah. Where these Tony decks, these Arisana decks that are trying to go long, do kind of have a bad time against you revealing your memory and incremental value every turn, right? Because that's what they're trying to do, but Luxemzander does do it pretty well because he doesn't spend any cards for his value, right?
And honestly, like healing 9 every turn is fucking awful.
Yeah, and Insignia lets you do that, right?
Yeah,
it lets you
because you just free set cards.
Yeah. So I'm curious if we'll see some more Luxemzander at Ontario. I'm very curious if anybody's going to try to pick that up.
I'm very curious what Deft Executor actually does.
Yeah, I'm sure we will talk about him in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
2 weeks time.
I'm sure if, and I'm gonna say this now because I'm almost positive that it's true.
Locking it in.
Anything is better than current level 2 standard.
Yeah,
it's
it's pretty tough.
It could almost have no text on the card, probably better than level 2 standard.
Yeah, he does sort of sit head and shoulders below every other champion.
Yeah.
Maybe in the game. Like, he might even be worse than, like, Mordred,
Yeah.
Which is wild. So I'm glad that they're giving him some love. But I think there's a bright future for Luxem. I'm not so much seeing it for Tamer right now. We made that, funny joke about Tamer being good in 2026. Hopefully it'll be before that.
Yeah, I'm hoping at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm hoping we get some support in the third set this year after MRC. I'm hoping we get some Tamer support.
Jungle World or something, and we get a bunch of good
It's all Tamer.
A new Tamer champion with a bunch of new cool animals and beasts. That's the issue.
Yeah, right. Maybe it's Sylvie's fault. Maybe we just got a broken Tamer that's not Sylvie. And
honestly, I think Sylvie's fine. It's just a lot of preparation to get to make her good, right? Like leveling up to 2 with floating memory and a beast and an animal is just free. Like you just get so much advantage from that. But that is such a hard place to get.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? I think she reads really well, but you're a creature deck, right? And all of your powerful effects on your champion are based around your creatures in your creature deck, but all of your creatures are kobolds of Carekeep, right? Like, if you have 2 of them in play, you draw 2 cards, but then you just draw 2 more 2/3s with a downside that you can't fulfill, right? So it's like... We'll try not to dwell on Sylvie too much, trying to talk about, FTC as a whole, but,
It's just like, once you get into the discussion, then you're like in the discussion, right?
Right. No, I get it. Yeah, I mean, it's important for us to, I think, for us and for, I think it's great looking at these backwards, right? Like going back and looking at our DOA retrospective, and then, in a few months, we'll come back and look at this. It's important to see where our thoughts are as the game progresses, because we've been here from the beginning, right? So we get like a full history of our journey with the game. So so that's how we feel about FTC. I think as a whole, terrific. Yeah. I was feeling a little down on old GA, pre-ban and pre-ascension. We were having. Or pre-ascent rather, we were having a bit of a tough time, but the season, the FTC season following Ascent Houston has been so reinvigorating, and we've had such a great time playing the game. We're not going anywhere, even if the game sucks and we're sad. We'll still be here, but it's better to be having fun, and we are definitely having fun with Fracture Crown, and
I think it also like reflects in our demeanor on the show too, like. I'm sure if you watch a couple of videos before Ascend Houston, they're probably not the best.
We're just
mood. But now, like, look at us. Like, we're smiling, we're joking around. Like, we're having a really good time with ALC, and it's just a very bright future right now.
Yeah, something that I say to a lot of people is I think that set 3 for new card games is super important. Everyone has some issues in the first 2, right? Distribution issues, power level issues, what have you, right? It's hard to make a card game. I understand that. And so set 3 is always so important. It feels like it's always like the make or break for these new card games. Like anyone who gets here, right, gets to set 3 and nails it, I think, has a good shot to stick around for the long run. And I'm so confident that that ALC is going to be the best time to jump into GA.
Yeah, and it just like in our little bit of testing we've done, like I can wholeheartedly agree that the game seems refreshed. It feels renewed. It feels like a whole.
Yeah.
It feels like I felt when you introduced it to me back in January of last year.
Sure.
That's how I feel when I'm playing with the new cards. It feels like this is the game that I wanted to play.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. It feels so different, right? Like we've been playing ALC and none of the games that we've played have felt at all synonymous to any of the games that we've played in the past, right? Because obviously we're both playing new champions, but they feel so unique and individualized, and I think that's something that they've really leaned into for ALC, and this is something that we mentioned a little bit on our spoiler show, but I do really want to hammer it home for people to watch the show, that I think one of the coolest parts, and I think why people are identifying so much with ALC, is that they're giving these characters an identity where it feels like in DOA they didn't really have one. We mentioned that literally on this show, so I get it. It has to be a more evergreen set to launch the game, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the coolest part about ALC is that Diana is Umbra, but she's based around curses, right? Tony is Neos, but he's based around tokens. Arisana is Astra, but she's based around potions, right? And star calling. They all are in an archetype, but even though we haven't seen any other clerics or guardians or rangers, these characters have set themselves into a niche within their own class, which I think is so cool that I can see, looking at these three heroes, I can see the design space for those classes and for those elements that are not these heroes, which I think is super important, where that's not really how
the others,
Sylvie or Rai or Lorraine feel, because I get it, they're evergreen, they have to be introducing the game, right? But Lorraine is the warrior, and I guess she summons swords, but that feels like it's the crux thing, right?
Right.
That I can't see the avenue for a different warrior or a different crux hero. I don't see it with the pool that we have here. But in ALC, the characters feel so individualized that I can see, what the non-alchemist cleric looks like, right? They just don't deal with any of this gather or potions or anything, and then they already feel distinct from Arisana, even though they have, a similar card pool. And that is the part that I find the most exciting. I'm such a character specialist person. I think the coolest trading card games, I guess, caveat, they are the ones that I currently play, but are these, games that sort of feel like a fighting game that rewards you for playing your character and playing them well and, fitting in your niche instead of just jumping from one thing to the other. And you only get that with true character individuality and game balance.
Right. And I think not leaning so much into the niche of that class, right, is pretty important, because I feel like games like Force of Will, who are also a champion-based class, or champion-based game, was open, right? You could play your deck however you wanted, but certain champions, when they came out, they were these are the 60 cards you play.
Right.
And there's nothing else. Whereas these new champions feel like there's just, they have their, you play this way, but then you can, later on down the road when we get a new Neos character,
right,
it might be a completely different thing. And the cards are just generic enough where it feels like they would slot in perfectly on something else.
Right. Yeah, I think the part that sets them out so much is that this game does have pretty open deck building. Mm-hmm. You are restricted by color, but obviously that's your choice, and you are sort of restricted by class bonus, right? Some cards are not good without class bonus, even though you can play them, and some are, right? You look at Creative Shock, card does have class bonus, and this class bonus is very strong, but it doesn't mean that you don't see it in every other fire deck, right? Because it's just a very strong card. Yeah. And I guess up until ALC, DOA and FTC, felt so much like every deck is just good card soup, right? Creative Shock is a great example, where you're just playing the best possible cards in slot, regardless of who they were designed for or what their identity is for the game, which is fine, and I think that makes a fine game. But I think what is so exciting about ALC and about the future is that even though we have the same deck building restrictions for the ALC heroes, their card text on the champions themselves is so much more focused and specialized that they feel like you are supposed to build them towards their strengths.
Right.
Where like Lorraine is just like overtly very powerful, right? She's like, I get sword for free, I get +2 and draw a card on level 2, and then, you know, both of her like level 3s have like a crux feel to them, but whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Lorraine will be good no matter what because she has such evergreen powerful abilities printed on her card. Where, you know, something like Arisana, who both of her texts on her level 1 and her level 2 are wholly revolved around the potion mechanic,
right?
Mean that is the strength that you're trying to build her towards, right? Because that is just what it says on her card. And then they can print, you know, a cleric that has nothing to do with those gather abilities, and they'll feel completely different, right?
You know, that you could print a new cleric and lean more into the Astra star calling stuff.
Right.
You know, like I know Arisana does that a little bit, but like you can just increase, you know, makes more powerful star calling cards that have their own unique secondary ability that's not gather.
And I don't even assume that star calling is the cleric thing. I think that's supposed to be the Astra identity, right?
Yeah.
So like, you know, maybe in set 4 or whatever at the end of the year, I don't know what classes they're going to do. That is up in the air. But as an example, we get a new cleric and they have a different advanced element, and then they just like don't feel like Ari at all. And they can do that with Tony, and they can do that with Diana, because they all just like they have such it feels like refined identities, which I think you know, the development team has done a great job. And obviously, like I said, they're coming into their stride, right? Like you get better as time goes on. You design better cards as you know, have experience and have things to draw on and get feedback from the community. So yeah, we're gushing, just nothing but happy thoughts and looking forward to the future and exciting stuff. So I'm moving my hands all around. You know?
He's very excited. It's maybe too much Red Bull in that
It's
cup.
too much Red Bull. I haven't eaten anything today. I'm full of caffeine. But yeah, so we're very excited for ALC. That is our FTC retrospective. Also had a great time post those bad things at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's good that, like I said, I think we try to be honest and, you know, share criticism, not from any sort of place of, you know, like malintent or whatever. It's just, I think it's important to be honest and, you know, tell you guys how we're feeling. And hopefully maybe you guys feel the same. Maybe you don't. Let us know what you thought of the FTC season and how it treated you as a competitive player, as a casual player, as a collector, you know, whatever. We didn't even broach the collector side of what FTC meant for people.
I think it's a little bit tough for us, right? Because like, I think at both of the hearts of us, we're both competitive players,
right?
So like the collecting half is like a secondary to us,
right?
Whereas like I think if we had someone,
what up, Mitch?
Yeah, like Mitch come in, right? Like he could give a better retrospective of the collector side of things.
You let me know, Mitch. Yeah, I agree. We've been going on long enough. We won't broach that topic. It was a thing. Yeah. I'm glad they've made changes. So we'll leave it at that. But yeah, we're nothing but sunshine and rainbows. We are so excited for ALC coming out in 2 weeks for us as of recording now. So that's a big deal. And then we have, my Lord, Ascent Ontario in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Very interested to see how much ALC is there, and it's very interested to see who falls back and just plays water allies. Water
allies, wind allies,
right.
Luxem Xander, who knows? Like
right.
Merlin. Like I think a lot of these older heroes are going to be pretty good. Maybe in a couple of weeks, or you know, when we find ourselves a week that we haven't. We don't have like a topic plan for or whatever. I would like to do some Ontario predictions because I think that's fun. Just a shot in the dark, you know.
Okay.
What we think people are going to be playing, what we think is going to win, you know.
I like that.
Whatever Caben's playing is what's going to win.
Yeah, maybe
you know?
we can talk to Caben and ask him
yeah. I'd be like, we won't put it out until after the event. Just let us know what you're playing, and we will tell everyone that you were going to win the event. Yeah. Yeah, super exciting, and we can't wait to. I'm sad that we're not going to Ontario.
Yeah,
flights are expensive.
Yeah, California's
Weebs,
tough.
please. East Coast, save me.
Anywhere on the East Coast.
Anything, please.
It's just so much easier because,
I'll do a 10-hour drive, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Steve will do a 10-hour drive, so I mean.
Yeah. That's not an issue. Just please.
Please for us. But
East Coast.
The cool thing about Ontario is I'm super excited to watch coverage from TM32. This is one of my favorite things, and I grew up watching Magic tournaments, and I love watching Flesh and Blood coverage, and I think coverage for GA events has been pretty sparse, but obviously the coverage that Shinja did at Houston was terrific, and I just am so excited to see what they do for Ontario.
Yeah, so I am as well.
We'll be home watching with you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's all we got. You got anything else for the people, Steven?
No, I don't.
I'll give him a big old kiss.
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I will say, keep deck building. ALC is very cool.
Keep deck building. Send us all your deck lists. We promise that your secrets are safe with us, as we will not be competing
in Ontario.
So feel free to send me your Arisana deck lists so that I can play them. I remember way back in DOA where I got when we didn't have any tournaments and the only things that were happening were the Discord webcam tournaments, like the main cord ones, and
or like the tabletop simulator.
The TTS. It was TTS Discord tournaments where they were like giving away first ed cases. You remember that?
Yeah.
And I got a message from one Creative Shock Zone Limelight that was like, I think that this deck is broken, and he sent me the first Ferrari list, that became Wind Lorraine, and that's what I want. I want somebody, I guess Lime, to send me.
Lime, can you just build him an Arisana deck, please?
Yeah. Build me an Ari deck, send me the list, so that I don't have to think Unga Bunga smash face on table.
Yeah,
that's my plan. All right, well, thank you guys for watching. We will see you next week. I don't think we have anything particular planned, so if you guys have anything that you want us to talk about, you let us know here on the YouTubes, on the Twitters, on the Discords, wherever you want to reach us, and we will see you next week.
Have a good one, guys. Start the show.